Hello, welcome to the Spiritual Tradie podcast. My name is Spiritual Tradie, and your name is Skye Tipler.
Hello, how are you?
Is Rosie coming to say hello?
Yep. Okay.
Hello, Rosie.
Well,
Oh, look, and there's Pearl as well.
Yeah, we've got everyone.
We've got a whole crew.
Okay, say thanks, Pearly.
Are you recording already?
He's recording.
Oh,
Yes.
Take Rosie pedals.
Skye Tipler,
Yes,
how are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you, Daniel.
Very well. What is it that you do with yourself?
Most of the time, so first and foremost, I'm a mum of a furry child and a human
Yes.
who's 8. And when I'm not doing that, I run a PR and communications agency. And I also just launched a new business, which is another consultancy called the Ministry of Work, which is all about workplace wellbeing and culture and moving the dial on our relationship to work.
So can you explain a little bit more about what that is? Because I've never heard of that before.
Well, I mean, there's obviously traditional, HR people and consultancies that offer services in this space. I think, over the last, I've been working for longer than I'd like to admit, but certainly in the last 5 years, I think there's been just this groundswell of dissatisfaction around work. And, that's in every industry at every level, from leaders, all the way down to support team members. Everybody's feeling dissatisfied with work and their relationship with work. So, there's a number of solutions have come to play, including, different consultancies. Ours is different in that, I guess we say that we address the root cause rather than provide plasters, as they say in the UK, or Band-Aids.
Yes.
And rather than plasters and Panadol. Because I think that's for the most part what a lot of HR and just any leaders have done. Quick, here's a wellbeing program, here's a fruit delivery every week, here's a bike rack out the front, and look at us, we've got you a yoga class pass. And there is your wellbeing program. But it's just really missed the mark. So, through my own journey, I jokingly say that I worked in the ad industry in the 90s. I did the AFA, which is Australian Federation of Advertising Scholarship, into a large ad agency. And that's where I met Harvey Weinstein. And then I moved, I'm being sarcastic, but that persona.
I was like, right? Tell me.
Harvey, well, you know what? Harvey's second cousins and all his relatives, and every variation of him were there in persona. And then I moved from the ad industry to PR, where I was dancing with the devil wears Prada. So for me, I had my own journey around work and the way I was treated by people and what work meant to me. So that's when I started MKT. I decided that I would create the type of agency I wanted to work for. And 14 years later, here I am. So I've done that reasonably well, I think.
Cool. What you're talking about is changing these environments from being a toxic work environment into being somewhere where people want to be and want to go daily, right?
Yeah, in its most simplistic form. Sorry, I'm turning my ear off. In its most simplistic form, yes. But I think, what previously we have not addressed is the motivation that sits behind work. I think COVID, not wanting to talk about it too much, unless of course you do, but I think COVID and the experience that we've all had working from home and working more flexibly has highlighted an enormous amount of dissatisfaction, but also possibilities for people. People have realised, oh wow, I can do all of this in 4 days and I can actually do it from home and I can support my children and be a little more flexible with myself and my family and bring home the bacon, so.
But is there also a risk that if you're working from home that you never leave because you've always got work at home? There's no like distinction between the two?
Yes, and look, working from home, I've done it before. It's not my favourite thing, actually. I enjoy separation. I like going to my office, and I have set it up for it to be a place that I absolutely love and that my team all love, So I think, we've been very privileged in that way, but I think, yes, there's going to be some new ground rules that are going to have to be set for how that rolls.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see, how we open back up. And I'm sure a lot of people as well that have their own businesses and that have been smashed by COVID. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been affected by COVID. I mean, I had an agency of 19 people, and we had to make some redundancies. And it was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do. I've never, ever had to let anyone go in 14 years. And, we were literally hit within a couple of weeks, and over about a month, we've lost 65% of our client base. And I know that I'm not alone. The industry suffered a lot. Marketing and communications is one of the first things that gets cut because it's a discretionary spend, right? People say, oh, well, just quick, cut the marketing budget. We learned from the 90s that that's not such a good idea, though. And the brands that didn't cut their budgets are the ones that really shone. But look, that said, as much as that was incredibly difficult at the time, everything is always about how you handle it. Like my business partner Jess and I have been together for 11 years, and I think we channel as much Audrey Hepburn, we say, as much grace and empathy and kindness that we possibly can in everything that we do, and even in the difficult times. I mean, obviously these difficult times requires you to dial up all of those qualities, and worth noting also that we're a certified B Corporation. I can explain what that means if you want me to. Yeah, so B Corp is to business as a fair trade and organic is to coffee. B Corps businesses that believe people and the planet should not be sacrificed for profit. So it's a type of certification. So you have to go through a process and then you receive your certification if you're a good guy. Examples, there's lots of amazing global B Corps. It started in America about 15 years ago now. It's one of the fastest growing movements on the planet. All these giant companies committing, from Unilever, Danone, Laureate, all these enormous global organisations committing to certifying as B Corporations. But the big ones that you would all know would be Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, famously, and Tom's shoes. Two of those of which have been clients of mine. And yeah, so being a B Corp, in our DNA, we put people first. So, this time's been really difficult, but we've been doing a lot of things we've supported one of our team members into finding another job with another agency we work closely with, and we've been supporting some of the others by catching up with them every week and offering to help them with their CVs and doing all sorts of things. But yeah, there's no question that COVID has had an impact for us and many of our clients across all industries.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because surely like a lot of stuff can still be done online and whatever, but it's going to be funny or hard to see how restaurants are going to open up and be at half capacity, because they have a certain bottom line. They need to have a full restaurant for so many days a week to pay their bills, and all of a sudden the government's going to say, well, you can have 10 people in here instead of 30. It's not going to be really, it's going to be really super tough. And it's been a really confronting time, and a really kind of weird in a way, because they stopped the game, but they kept playing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like you can't roll the dice, but we're going to keep taking the money. So it's this very strange two-speed economy where half of us are stopping and the other half's going faster than ever. So
yeah, I don't feel like I had a little 3 a.m. deposit, I like to call them. And this deposit said that very clearly, to the extent to which we continue to think or believe or hope that we can reassemble or put back together what we had, will determine the length of time and the severity of our suffering. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
If we continue to try and put back normal, we're just going to continue to suffer because normal was unsustainable on so many levels. You know, the distribution of wealth, you know, like I don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but there's just the way we treat our elderly, you know, that breaks my heart. And actually I had something happen to me, was probably 10 days ago now. I was walking in the neighbourhood just early one morning, and there's quite a large nursing home. It's a very nice nursing home. And I just happened to look in the window, and it was just as the sun was coming up, and I just saw this little old man, and he was sitting in a common area, and he was just sitting in his chair, and he was just like this with his head hung, and his whole body language was just completely and utterly defeated. And it was, for me, it was just like a knife to the chest. I cried all the way home. I just had these huge tears rolling off, you know, off my face, because it was just, for me, it was just a symbol of what we've done to our elderly, you know, the people that we should respect the most, you know. And there are so many symbols of inequality and, you know,
unsustainability.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like Mother Nature's been going knock, 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 and we just haven't been listening. And, you know, and now she's taking the door down. And I'm not sure that the door's going to be the last thing that she does. The walls might be next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And so we wait to see how it all unfolds. But we could probably spend another hour talking about that, but we won't. I want to speak about you and find out how you became spiritual.
Oh, wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start, you know, by saying that I was very privileged to be born to very spiritual parents, particularly my dad. When I was little, we used to joke, we used to call him the sniffing man, because he was a long-term yogi, and he would practice some form of pranayama, and he would do this crazy thing where you go like this, you know, in a room. And I'm the eldest of 4 kids, and we would wake up and we would hear the sniffing man, and we thought it was hilarious. We lived in this big old house that had these big keyholes, you know, and we would all go up and take turns to look through the keyhole and see the sniffing man, and then we would fall about laughing. And then, of course, the sniffing man would come out very cross, like a very angry sniffing man. Yeah. He'd ruined his, you know.
Yeah, I'm glad he kind of sounds like it could have been a horror movie character. So yeah. It's not that bad. That's kind of lucky.
The sniffing man was, you know, very much a peaceful, kind, benevolent sniffing man.
Yes.
And then, you know, so he taught us all to meditate when we were little. We had a really long hallway, and he lay us all down on the carpet, you know, top to tail. And he would walk up the hallway and like teach us to breathe, you know. And, you know, there's so many anecdotes, but one of my favourite anecdotes was, you know, he has a bookshelf. Like, I have one of my bookshelves here behind me, you can see, but I have another one downstairs, and I'm kind of like, my friend who's a meditation teacher, obviously, who may or may not be your cousin, calls me Knowledge Chubby.
Johnny Pollard.
Pardon?
Johnny Pollard.
Yeah, Mr. Pollard calls me Knowledge Chubby.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I have a lot of books, but if I have a lot of books, my dad's got 10 times. He's got an enormous wall, and bless him, he has ordered them all into categories. There's Defrejon, Course of Miracles, Sufism, Islam, Life After Death, and literally, no jokes, there's a label on every shelf with every book, probably from the self-help aisle since 1970, right?
Wow.
I've actually got behind me some of Krishnamurti's first edition books that were on his shelf that I found only recently.
Ooh.
So, I had really early exposure to somebody that was on an amazing journey. But, you know, one of my earliest memories of him on his journey, you know, and now I look back, you know, I can see that when we were quite young, he was having quite transformational moments, you know, in his own process. But I remember sitting in the living room one night, and he just pointed to the lamp and he goes, "You know, you are the lamp." And I just like completely lost it. You know, what do you mean I'm the lamp? I mean, really, Dad, you know, you kind of lost your shit now. You know, this was this idea that there is no separation, of unity consciousness, and, you know, I am the lamp, I am the candle, this lamp, You know, there is no separation, you know. And
was it like that you are the physical object, or was it like you are the light of the lamp?
no, it was you are the physical object. You are the lamp.
Right.
Yeah. There is no separation. There's only one.
Uh-huh.
Even in inanimate objects.
Yes.
But you know, so I had exposure to that on a very deep level. But then I kind of was quite rebellious, maybe, and didn't want a bar of it as I got into my teenage years. And it wasn't until my early 20s when I had some severe digestive issues. Like, I just had the most terrible upset stomach, and you know, anything I ate would kind of aggravate it, and they thought I might have had Crohn's disease, and then they were testing me for all sorts of things, and then they gave me that big badge of you have irritable bowel syndrome. I'm like, oh great, what does that even mean, you know? And then I kind of started to realize, you know, hold on a second, maybe there's more to this than me, you know, being an early 20 person and drinking too much alcohol and, you know, eating fried food. Maybe there's stress, and maybe there's my relationship to my body. You know, I had an eating disorder when I was about 16, 17. You know, I didn't have a great relationship with my body, and I think that was starting to manifest. So I got, would you believe, I decided I would change gyms, and I ended up at a little gym in Paran in Melbourne called Brophy's. And as I walked in, there was a sign. And
Fred
it said,
Brophy's?
Pardon?
Fred Brophy?
Yeah, I think it might have been.
He was the guy that had the boxing tent.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, my mate used to fight for them.
Yeah, I think that's the guy. Yeah. But anyway, this is where I found Ayurveda, because they had a little sign, and they said, when you join the gym, you'll get an assessment, and we will tell you what your dosha is, and your gym program will be based on your dosha. And then there was a little flyer, you know, that pale green bad photocopy paper of a very Western looking guy, and it said he was an Indian Ayurvedic doctor. And I thought, you know what have I got to lose? So, I mean, that was really what kickstarted me. And I went to see this guy whose name was most un-Indian, Andrew Stenberg.
Yes.
And Mr. Stenberg was, for me, one of the most important people in my journey. He addressed the physical issues that I was having. He asked me to hand my health over to him for 6 months. He pretty much said, will you do as I will fix you, but you must do as I ask for 6 months. And I did. You know, how old was I? I was probably 23, 24. And I didn't drink for 6 months. And I took all the Ayurvedic herbs he asked me to take, and I made all the dietary adjustments, and you know, I didn't eat in front of the television. I did all these, you know, the principles many of us have come to know as normal, but back then it was quite absurd. You know, my friends thought I had completely lost it. And then there was just one missing piece in the puzzle, and he said to me, you know, you will never really transform until you learn to meditate. And I'm like, my dad taught me to meditate. And he's like, no, you need to learn transcendental meditation. It's very different to every other technique. Anyway, so after, you know, him knocking at me a few times, and, you know, I had got considerably better, I started looking into it. And I remember going to an introductory talk in Punt Road in South Yarra. And it's a very strange lady, a very strange old house, who wanted me to part with $3,500 for the privilege.
What?
Yeah. Back then, TM was $3,500.
Wow.
And I was really at loggerheads with this, because everything I had read, and I had started going down the rabbit hole, and in fact, some of my original books are behind me. I'd gone down that Maharishi Mahesh Yogi rabbit hole. I was all over him like a hot rash.
Yep.
You know, like a hot giggling rash with the shoulders up like this, like he does. But I did not understand how they could reasonably charge $3,500 for people to learn to meditate if this was something that they truly believed that everybody on the earth should have. So I was really conflicted with it, and that put a great big, you know, obstacle in my path, because I had a real kind of philosophical problem with that. And I remember having really heated, you know, debates with Andrew Stenberg about why he thought it was okay for them to charge $3,500 for it. Anyway, I sort of, you know, didn't learn, and I went and I tried everything. So I went to the Buddhist Center. I went to the Sri Chinmoy Meditation Center. I had private one-on-ones with an Ainsley Mears stillness meditation instructor. I had every recording and DVD. I literally just put them all, sent them all to the op shop recently, of every type of meditation. And I actually remember going to my dad and saying, finally saying, okay, I think I need to do this, because I really wasn't that great. And by this stage, I had an incredibly stressful job in a big ad agency. Mm-hmm. And, at the time it was the largest ad agency in the country. And, I was working on Telstra, and I was only young, and I had, duties and responsibilities beyond my years, but it was probably my own fault. So I went to my dad and said, how about you lend me $3,500? I need to learn to meditate. And, the sniffing man turned into a troll and nearly ate me alive, and just said, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Sure, go for it.
He said, what the fuck? You think, and my dad doesn't really swear that much at all. He's English, he's got a little bit of properness. But he said, you think I'm going to lend you $3,500 when I taught you to meditate when you were 5? Get down on the ground, lie down and breathe. So I went, skulking off. Okay, maybe that one's not going to work. Yeah. So I kept going to, the Buddhist meditation, and then I found a yoga studio, and I started doing the yoga nidra, the guided meditation, and just none of it. It was all great. Don't get me wrong. It was all great and very helpful. But it wasn't until the TM organisation dropped the price to $1,200.
Yes.
By this stage, I think I was 20. I was almost 27. I was 26. And there was a guy teaching. He was an ex-Qantas pilot, and he was teaching around the corner from where I was living. So I finally learned TM. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, honestly, I used to joke that it was like I had, my meds in my back pocket, yet, it was like a bottomless bottle of meds, that I could just pull out. And I almost felt, smug that I had this and nobody else had this. It's like, God, guys, you really need to get on board, because my friends at the time were all just like, oh, you silly hippie,
Yeah.
And funnily enough, they're still saying that, but that's okay. I'll meet them at the pearly gates, and I'll be sailing through, and they'll be waiting in the queue. But anyway, so I guess that's part of the journey. I did have quite a large break in my 30s where I established a reasonably good practice, but I did have a break in my 30s when partying seemed far more important than meditating, or experimenting. But then, I had my daughter. Actually, it was before I had my daughter, actually. I think I was sort of, we were thinking about having a baby, and, I just really fell back in love with my practice. And that's when I learnt again. So I had engaged with Johnny Pollard and Laura Poole to teach some of my team members, one team member in particular who still works for me to this day. She's amazing. She was really, really stressed, and it was sort of representing in this terrible breathing issue. She couldn't take a full breath. She was like this all around the office. It's like, shit, this is no good. You got to learn to meditate. She's too scared to go and do it by herself. So I said, okay, I'll come.
Yeah.
So I learned Vedic meditation. So I'm one of the few people who've done both.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I'll shut up now.
No, that's great. That's great. And so you took a break from the meditation, and you came back to it before you had a child. Mm-hmm. That's good. And you still practice now? I
do. You're sitting in my meditation space.
8 years later?
Yeah, very much.
What do you feel like the difference is between non-meditating Skye and meditating Skye?
Oh, it's not even comparable. It's actually not even it's a non-negotiable to me. I just, I get up at 5 a.m. or between 5 and 5:30, and I come up here and I sit in this little chair right here, with my infrared heater right here. It's rather cold here. I can see you in your t-shirt being smug.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you could have seen Skye today. I went to the beach and I was in boardies. That was it. Swimming in the ocean. Perfect.
Not going to happen. It's not going to happen here for 6 months. Actually, do you know what? Today in Melbourne was absolutely beautiful. It was one of those mornings where the backyard was just covered in mist. Yes. And then as it started to break away, this beautiful sun was warming our bones. So it wasn't too bad here, but there's no question I wasn't going to get into bikini and get but yeah, so meditating, Skye, you know, I mean, it's just a different version. On the odd occasion, you know, like sometimes on school holidays, you know, I recently went away with my sister and all her kids, and I found it very hard to meditate because it was just chaos. She's got 4 kids, and so there was 5 kids running around, and they get up, you know, when I got up to meditate. So there's I don't have a competitive time edge there anymore. So I kind of lost my window. I didn't have my chair. I was finding it all a bit tricky. And then I sort of found myself becoming less grounded, less stabilized, more reactive. You know, all the things people speak about, you know, it's just the gift of meditation is, you know, every single one of my team members has learned Vedic meditation or the one giant mind technique. And, you know, they all say the same thing. We have a meditation room in the office, you know, and when they don't meditate, actually, I spoke to one of my senior team members today, and she, you know, she just lost her father quite suddenly, and he's in the UK. She was over here, so she had to go back for 6 months, and she's really struggling. And the first thing I said to her, "You're not meditating, are you?" And she's like, "No," and I know it's not helping me. So, you know, just get back on the meds, you know.
Yeah. And funny that what the first thing that we tend to drop when something happens in life that's difficult is the thing that's going to help us the most, you know.
Yeah, it's just kind of part of the human condition, though, isn't it?
Sure is, yeah.
So there's one interesting thing that's been happening for me lately with my practice is that, you know, I've never really consistently got my second meditation in, and it's been a real, it's been a bit of a sticking point for me, and I've never really understood why, because I'm incredibly disciplined in so many ways, you know, but why can't I manage to get my second meditation? It's 20 minutes. I even put a meditation room in the office, you know, and it's really nice. I can sit there and meditate. But, you know, I would schedule it in my diary. I tried all sorts of tactics. But then I just worked out that there was some sort of inner resistance. I'm like, why am I resisting this? What's going to happen to me if I meditate? And then all of a sudden, that was like the big scary question, you know. What's going to happen to Skye if she meditates twice? And I guess my fear has been that, you know, maybe I become not relevant. Maybe I drift off into cosmic bliss. And we can't run the PR firm and do all the crisis management and be all busy if we're doing that. But
maybe it just makes you awesome. More awesome.
Yeah, maybe. And look, you'll be pleased to know that I made a commitment to myself that because I really want to do a knowledge course that's coming up, one of the teachers in our tradition. And I've committed to myself that it's quite expensive, if I do not or cannot manage to meditate twice a day until that, it's in 2 weeks' time, then I do not have permission to do the course. So for the last 3 days, I have meditated twice.
Beautiful. Very good.
We will see what happens.
Yes, I reckon.
I need an anvil to hold me down.
Yeah. Well, what you should do is meditate 3 times a day, and then if you miss one, there's no harm.
Yep.
I was going to say, do you have any, if anything you think you care to share in the sense of spiritual experiences that may be a little bit woo-woo or a little bit out there that you've had that were like kind of mind-blowing or anything like that you'd want to share with people?
Yeah, sure. I've had heaps. So,
yeah.
You know, I think the more you meditate, the more you become open to these sorts of things. And I had a really big experience in India. I've been to India quite a few times, and not just to meditate. My uncle worked for the United Nations, and my uncle and aunt lived in Hyderabad. So I'd been to India a couple of times with them and spent sort of extended periods of time there. But this was on a meditation retreat, and I'd had high rounds, which is the practice of spending. It's a 15-minute practice of some asana, meditation, shavasana. And, you know, the aim of that, as you well know, is to get yourself into a very de-excited state. Anyway, so I managed to get myself a lot less excited than you find me now. And this really weird, and I remember we were staying in this hotel on the Gunga, and it was beautifully warm, and I put my yoga mat out on the balcony, which was game because there were some rotten monkeys who'd already tried to get into my room, and they were watching me from the balcony around the corner, and they're quite like big monkeys, not little monkeys, big monkeys. And anyway, I was lying there, and all of a sudden I felt like a giant soda bubble was coming up my body, but it had something inside it, and it was like this amazing sort of cerise colour, like this beautiful, beautiful pink colour. And it was coming up, and it got to my belly, and it was
while
like
you're meditating?
While I was lying in Shavasana, right?
Oh, right, yes.
This was like day 10 when I got to the highest number of rounds.
Yes.
Then this big bubble, it was like I was birthing a bubble, but the other way, right? And so it's coming up, and it just kept getting stuck. And then I was like, oh, I was like almost couldn't breathe, and finally it comes up. And finally, when it got to my throat, I sort of got the words, and the bubble said to me, or the words inside the bubble that were so clear, that you knew you were loved, but you never felt it.
Ooh.
I was like, whoa, that was big.
Yes.
And that makes so much sense because, you know, my mum is an amazing, beautiful mum who I'm very close to, but she wasn't very affectionate. She really struggled. I mean, her mother wasn't very affectionate, just wasn't passed down. You know, my dad was quite affectionate, but my mum didn't really hug us much. You know, my sisters and I have kind of worked that out, and you know, it's okay. We've all ended up sort of okay. But it was a really big moment for me that came in meditation. You know, that through that process, I had managed to through the process of meditation, I had managed to process this very large feeling that I had. You know, you knew you were loved, but you never felt it. It was a physical thing. And that had caused me problems in my life. It had been kind of like a constant source of knock, 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 which is, you know, this physical contact, this touch, this affection. You know, my husband still says sometimes he thinks I'm a bit cold. And I said, I'm working on it.
Did that cause a bit of an emotional release as well when that you felt that?
Oh my God. So it got to here and I got the words, and then it got to sort of my face.
Yeah.
And it was a flood of tears.
No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was massive. I've had a couple of others, and more recently, you're going to really think I've lost my shit, Daniel. But I have felt really compelled to watch some UFO documentaries.
Right.
I have always long believed that we are arrogant to think that we are the only ones in our universe. We're the only living beings. It's just not possible. It's just dumb.
It doesn't seem very smart to think that, does it?
It's dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but also there has to be, you know, many beings in different dimensions that are right here as well.
Of course.
You know, so it's all alien is only because we don't know it, you know.
Yeah, and we've been sold a lie, you know, among many, many lies we've been sold. This is one. But anyway, so I've always felt drawn to the sky at night, to the moon. You know, Pearlie, my daughter, doesn't even call the moon, she calls it Chandra, which is the Sanskrit word for the moon. We really have like a beautiful emotional connection to the moon, both of us. Anyway, more recently I've watched a couple of documentaries, including that one on Netflix that's so worth watching if you haven't watched it. That with
Bob Lazar?
Unacknowledged.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was hearing about this one the other day, yeah.
Yeah, so you've got to watch it. I mean, I've sort of, I'm half a conspiratorial theorist, a very rational one.
Yes.
But
are they all?
No, many of the ones I know are not. You know, they don't present some of the arguments, or they don't do some of the arguments that are quite sane any justice, I'm afraid.
Yes. Yeah.
But anyway,
You're not flat Earth, are you?
Pardon?
You're not into flat Earth, are you?
Not flat Earth, but some other things.
Some things. Unacknowledged, you're saying?
Unacknowledged, yeah. So I watched this, and and another one called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And I realised that something that happened to me when I was about 6 or 7 was actually an encounter with another being.
What?
Yeah, it is such a strong memory for me. I was in my bedroom, and where I slept, you know, like this is my bed, and there was a window here like this. And I remember waking in the middle of the night feeling this really strong pull to stand up on my bed. And I stood up on my bed and I opened my curtains and I looked out, and there was a light being just hovering, you know, and I came out and I told my mum that there was fairies outside my window. Right. So I always maintained to my sisters and my brother that, you know, that this was an encounter with a fairy. And to this day, you know, I saw its body, and yeah, it was this beautiful bright white light being. And anyway, when I saw a couple of these movies, I realised it was an alien. It was I think personally it was an Arcturian.
What about an angel? A deva?
No, it was a light being from another planet.
It could be from a different dimension.
Could be a deva.
Could be a deva.
Possible.
Mahadeva. It could be. I won't get into that actually.
I've got a lot of devas here, Daniel. You'd be very pleased. I have Vishnu.
Oh, Vishnu.
Durga, Devi.
Durga Devi.
I
did a big yagya today for Saraswati, actually.
Saraswati today.
We just did a big one today for her,
yeah. So that was, you know, my first kind of really spiritual thing. I've only just realised kind of what it was. Yeah, but I've had other things, and I've had more recently have other experiences with people that have passed. But that's kind of another rabbit hole, maybe.
You can go into it if you like.
No, that's okay. You got any more questions for me?
My only other question is, what is your favourite spiritual wisdom or quote? And if you don't have one, be Miss Knowledge Chubby, you're in trouble.
I mean, I've got a lot. This is the problem.
No doubt. How do you boil it down and take the most potent one and give it to me right here?
I really might disappoint you. Okay, I'll give you my one for the times. And I actually put this on our my MKT, my company Instagram, and I had my designer create this beautiful little tile for it. And it's actually not a quote, it's a question. What would love do?
So it's like a in the moment. Sorry, you continue.
Yeah, well, it's exactly right. It's in the moment. It's like whatever is happening for you at that time, whatever has been presented to you, what would love do? How would love respond? And, you know, I shared this with my team, and I'm sure they all kind of think silly hippie. I actually don't think they do. I think they enjoy it because it is quite a different form of leadership. But it is around, you know, we have to move from this sort of fear and loathing and competition to this mutual aid and cooperation underpinned by love, you know. And it's a really potent question for anyone, no matter what age you are, no matter what situation you're in. What would love do? So I can give you Ramdas stuff. I could give you Defrijon. I could, you know.
I like that. That's good. That's the one that's most relevant for you, or the one that resonates the most at the moment, or for maybe.
You know what I like about it too is it's got energy. It's got movement. It's action. You know, it's like, and it's very useful. You know, in PR we talk about news you can use. It's news you can use. You know, it's a piece of information that you can say, okay, that is so simple. I'm not going to forget that. And I can apply it, you know, when my 8-year-old, who's supposed to be homeschooling, has got on some sort of video game and is, you know, doing everything other than what she's supposed to be doing. What would love do? I would not angrily snatch the iPad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my little quote, Daniel.
Beautiful. I like it. So is there anything else that you'd care to share before we wrap up the potty? No,
I mean, look, my thing has been recently, I mentioned this idea of just hanging on to normal, and, you know, the extent to which we continue to hang on to it will inform the length and depth of our suffering. I think that's one perspective. You know, obviously opinions are like arseholes. We've all got them. But I think, it feels to me like this period that we're going through is going to come in phases. We might resume some sort of normality in the coming weeks and months when we come out of lockdown, or some sort of variation of lockdown. But I don't think Mother Nature's going to let us off scot-free. If you listen to some of the shamans and the energy workers, I see an amazing energy healer and the shaman, and they talk about the frequency of the earth is changing. And, as the frequency of the earth rises closer to some of these other, purported light beings, that, the Arcturians, the Palladians, they all vibrate at a very different frequency to us, which is why they're shapeshifters, which is why they can move through realities and dimensions. But our frequency is changing. And, in that process, as we kind of, recalibrate, there will be some upheaval and some discomfort. And, I thought about something recently, and, I feel like sometimes I'm a walking contradiction. I work in PR, and I can be PR darling with the best of them. Not so much anymore, but, I can wear the clothes and the bags, and I can do all of that. Yet the other side of me is deeply spiritual and deeply, in touch with nature. And I think, as this starts to unfold, much of that will drop away, and it will be very easy. We've all played a role in this game, me included. Like, my company's a B Corp, and I'm a good boss, and I'm kind, and but I've played a role, for my 46 years on this earth, in this game that we call life, and the game has to change. So if I have to go through some hurt, and I already have, I've had to make some adjustments, to things, and I'm really okay with it. And I'm really okay with it in the context of the greater good, in the context of what we all want and what I want for my daughter. I've got the most amazing little light being out there who's so vibrant and full of life. And I want an amazing planet and a place for her to be on. So I'm going to work really hard at, making sure that we don't go back to the norm, and my only other thing I would like to offer is just around work and around the context of everything that we're facing at the moment, I felt very, very unmotivated. And it's not like me at all. I'm kind of incredibly driven and always have been. And I've been hearing this from all my contemporaries, my friends in the same industries, different industries, all like ringing me, almost, someone in tears saying, I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to have to quit my job. I'm so unmotivated. I'm like, don't worry, I am too,
There's no desire there, right? The desire isn't coming from source. The desire to go and do this irrelevant thing, like the program that we used to run on, the program's been turned off, and we're like, what the fuck? Like, how do we do this,
Yeah, it's exactly right. Yeah, perfectly. But, so I was really resistant, and I was quite annoyed with myself, which is the most unspiritual of me. But, I was like, okay, this is pathetic, Skye, get your hustle on, Like, I just can't. And then I just kept getting this little line, lie in the grass, Skye, lie in the grass, Skye. Oh my God, shit. What do you want me to do? Lie in the fucking grass? Well, that won't pay the bills, will it? And so I was walking with my friend, who's this energy healer and beautiful human, and I was explaining this to her.
Who is this human? Can you tell me her name?
Her name is Julia Gorovich.
Very good.
Yeah. And she's amazing. And anyway, I was walking with her, and I was explaining this to her, and she said, so have you laid in the grass? And I went, well, yes, I did. But how long do you want me to lie there for? And she said, Skye, you need to look at this a little differently. What if lying in the grass was the most important work you ever do? I was like, oh God, this is the most important thing I can do. Quick, where's the grass? So I literally got home, and I said to Pearlie, because, as I mentioned, we've had some reasonable weather here for Melbourne. Quick, we're doing sun school. She goes, what's sun school? And I said, sun school is school in the sun outside in the grass.
Yes.
Okay. So we get the picnic rugs and the blankets and the cushions, and out we go, and we do sun school. And we've done this like quite a few times, and it's been actually amazing. And then and building on what my friend Julia said to me about what if this is the most important work you'll ever do, and then I started wondering, and I was like, what if this is the most important work I'll ever do? And in stillness, my decisions are better. The path forward is far more illuminated and clearer to me. My relationships with others are better because they come from a more still place. I mean, it's not brain surgery, but I'm a brain surgeon, so.
But no, it's exactly what you said. It's perfect sense. Like, why do we so get caught up trying to get to the outcome instead of enjoying the moment that we're in, and enjoying the grass and the sun, and not rushing away from it to try to achieve some other thing.
Yeah, and it just doesn't feel what the need of the time is, and I sort of think, like, what can I do? How can I help people? I'm a really helpful character. And I actually set up a WhatsApp group. My daughter and I did a letterbox drop to our whole block when we first went into lockdown. And it just was really just a short note saying to everybody, would you like to join a WhatsApp group? We're going to set it up so we can support each other during this time, and particularly some of the elderly and more vulnerable people in our community, because there's quite a few little old ladies living on their own. Not so many little old men. I think maybe they all passed away already.
They have a shorter life expectancy.
They do.
Did you have to do a lot of work teaching old ladies how to use WhatsApp?
No, because actually most of them have got neighbours or sons or somebody else who's sort of supporting them. But I've got 49 people now in my WhatsApp group, which is pretty much our entire block. And what has occurred on this WhatsApp group has been heartwarming beyond, like, I've been reduced to tears, and my husband just looks at me and goes, oh God, what are you crying about now? The neighbourhood WhatsApp group again? I am actually, because, one little old lady over the road, she's actually not bad at using WhatsApp, but she just posted early one morning, it was like 6:30 a.m, because of course I was in my meditation chair. All I see in the WhatsApp when I come out of my med is like 5 photos of her heating control panel. I'm like, and she says, it's Carol here from 28 Binny. My heating's not working. That's it. Anyway, but lo and behold, by the end of the day, someone had gone round to Russell, who's like two houses from the corner, and he's a handyman, and they've rallied Russell, who's not on the WhatsApp group because he doesn't have a phone that would host WhatsApp. It's like
right.
Like a flip phone,
Yeah.
So Russell, we have to use old-fashioned means. So we get Russell, and then Russell comes, and then next thing, Carol has posted, Russell is the kindest man on earth. He's fixed my heating. I'm warm. This is so good. And we had, I put puzzles over someone's fence, and then everybody's sharing limes and chilies and things they've grown. And then the NBN went down, every day after day. And so we all messaged. Now we've got our local MP, because we've got in a group and we've lobbied him to get the NBN and kick their ass. And, then the water went out. And then I get all these messages. Hey, everybody, don't drink the water. Southeast Water have turned the water off and it's coming out brown, full of silt and clay. Don't drink the water. It's like, this is just the best thing, And then, the other night, these people had, one person decided to thank me for setting up the group, and then it was just this flood of messages saying, we have all been so moved by this small act in this WhatsApp group and so many gestures of kindness, and we can't thank you enough. And for me, that's it. Job done. Lying in the grass.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's great. And it's like points back to the thing that we're missing is the community aspect of our lives. We're busy and we're going and we're trying to achieve and accomplish, but what is the actual experience that we're having? Is it connectedness? Is it community? Or is it disconnection and anxiety?
Yeah.
That's great. I love that story.
Yeah, it's been so good, and I'm sure there's more to come, and we're all going to have a huge street party when we're allowed to.
Yeah, no doubt.
That I'm calling the news cruise for, because I think it's going to be really, really good. But yeah, so, and look, I think that there's so much uncertainty, and there's no leadership, our politicians, honestly.
But the problem is that you've hired lawyers to run an economy, and so when an economy stops, you expect them to somehow be compassionate. Like, it's not a part of their functionality. They're not built for that, you know?
No, and I mean, look, but there's not leaders anywhere in society, you know. We've looked to the church, epic fail. You know, government, epic fail.
Yeah.
Not-for-profits and NGOs had a good crack, but, you know, probably epic fail. We've never been fatter, sicker and sadder. You know, I wrote a piece for the sister company we've set up for the Ministry of Work, and, you know, this was one of my late night messages actually a few years ago, was about setting up this company, and it was very clear to, and it said, if we can change the way we work, we can change the world. And that's the premise of this company that I've set up. But, you know, the article that I wrote is our kind of seminal, kind of foundational piece, and it talks about the state of humanity and also what's the answer. And I'm not saying I hold all the answers.
I am.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. Well, you have the answers, or you think I do?
No, you do. Yeah, you do. I'm saying you do.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I'll have a go.
Just own it.
I'll have a go.
You're the home of all knowledge.
All knowledge chubbiness.
That's your true nature.
That's true.
Mm.
No, you know, I sort of developed this thing called the trilogy of connection, and you know, it's a triangle with the love heart in the middle, and the top point is connection to self. We must turn to our inner worlds, and we must address our disconnection with ourselves, and that starts with meditation. My dad jokingly says, whatever the question, meditation is the answer.
Did he learn to Vedic meditate after all this, or does he still do his own sniffing still?
He does some sniffing and some, he uses the One Giant Mind app, actually. He's very satisfied with that. Mm-hmm. But he probably needs to learn. I would like him to learn. Yeah. But yeah, so the trilogy of connection, go inward, address our inner worlds first, plant beautiful, you know, tulips and ferns and things in our inner world, you know, yes. and make a beautiful forest in there. And then take that inner world out and connect with each other, you know, and build community, as you said, build community, you know, hold relationships in very high esteem. And then we must also connect to nature. You know, we've forgotten our interdependence in the planet, you know. You know, so it's this kind of three-way connection, and I do believe it has to start with our inner worlds, and maybe the two can be simultaneous, but the need of the time is, for me, you know, in my opinion, is to connect with our inner worlds, because once we do that, you know, if we another message, nighttime message, if we save the humans,
yes,
save the planet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to only give to animal and environmental charities for years. I used to call myself a misanthrope, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a human who doesn't like other humans. I thought we're all just shitful fucks.
Yeah.
Rapacious, shitful creatures.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden I realised there's no point in giving all the money to the planet and the animals, because the money's controlled by the dumbass humans anyway.
That's right.
You know, going to those charities, if we can just save the humans, then the humans will save the planet and save the animals. You know. Right. Yeah, so that was a long answer to the question.
And you had all the knowledge, like you said.
Just some little tiny.
and coming back to what you were saying before about the Earth changing vibration, it's been quite weird. You know, it's been quite a strange transition into this new way of being, as we say. But also, I feel personally that nature's giving us this raise in vibration, and with that comes this kind of message of suffering's going to end. Like, or suffering won't be sustained. So whenever there's somewhere that's like there's a kink in the pipe where you're doing agricultural, you know, manslaughter, or you're poisoning the environment, or you know, even like you said, harvesting old people into homes, and people not living a healthy old age like we should. We shouldn't be getting dementia at 60 and 70 and dying and being put in homes and being put in respite. We should be living long, healthy, happy lives with healthy bodies, not propped up on pharmaceutical medication for the golden or whatever, the twilight years of our life. And the sad part about this is that it's being highlighted to us by those people passing away, because they're vulnerable and they're all together in these places. I feel like that with the raise of that vibration means that those people, they can't sustain on this plane anymore. And also, like I'm saying, with the agriculture, and it's a real wake-up call for everybody to really have a good look at it, not just our own connection to self, but what we're eating, what we're consuming, as in, like, are we sitting around really watching Married at First Sight and shit like The Bachelor and just putting absolute nonsense into our minds? And you know, what are we actually here doing? Like, what are we really doing here, you know? And just bringing that question to the forefront, which is, you know, as on the bad side, the good side of this whole event is that hopefully we do, like, all those people feeling not desiring to do the same old shit. Yeah. Hopefully that desire stays that way, and we make the big changes, and we start to make the difficult turn. We take the big ship and we start to steer it and turn it around. You know, it might take a while, but we need to do it.
Yeah, and look, I absolutely agree, and I think there will be some collateral damage, as you pointed out, you know, in this. I think that, you know, the elderly people in our community have suffered terribly. However, you know, I think, you know, hopefully, as you said, we can, you know, turn the ship around before the whole thing implodes. And I'm very confident that we will. I'm actually incredibly optimistic. And I think what will happen is there's just relevancy. There's just so much that's no longer relevant. You know, like, people are not, you know, I turned down a really large piece of business today that we've been working on because the guy was just a complete and utter jerk. You know, and I just, it's not relevant to me to work with somebody like that. I mean, I've kind of been a little bit like that for a long time, but, you know, as I said, we've also been impacted by this, and perhaps a different person may have decided that they needed to keep this piece of work. And I'm like, no, I don't want it. I'd rather not do it. It's not aligned with my values. You know, and I think that the agriculture piece is absolutely massive. I mean, my nickname is Skye. My business partner's husband came up with a name.
I like it.
If it's not organic, I'm not eating it. I've done quite a lot of work over the years for the organic industry, for Australian Certified Organic, who are the largest certifiers, and have believed my whole life in that Teddy Roosevelt quote, he who destroys his soil destroys himself. You know, we are apparently only something like between 40 and 60 soil rotations away from ground zero, which is no nutrition left in the soil, so we won't be able to plant it.
And with that comes the decreasing nutrition, as we're already seeing in the food that's coming from that soil anyway on the way to that place. But that's not something that is set in stone if we change what we're doing. That's only...
Yeah. And, you know, I think the other thing too, you know, like, I have a friend and a client, his name's Professor Mark Cohen. You may have heard of him. He would be a great person to chat to. He's an amazing man. And
your friend, is it?
Pardon?
Your friend, is it, did you say?
Yeah, he's a friend, but he's also a client. We do some work for him. But, you know, he's written, among other things, he's been a professor at RMIT for 16 years until recently, and he's got his business called Extreme Wellness. He tours with Wim Hof, you know, the ice cold guy.
Yeah.
So my friend Mark is the science behind Wim Hof. So he provides all the data and the science, but behind the idea of hot cold therapy. But, you know, Mark wrote this amazing children's book, and I can send it to you after so you can post it in the notes. But, you know, it's a Buddhist story, but it's a story about a man who has the horse, and all his neighbours say, well, that's not fair. You've got a horse and I don't have a horse. And he said, well, it's not good or it's not bad. And then it goes through the whole story, and then all these things happen to the man in his life, and he has some adversity, and he says, well, it's not good and it's not bad, you know. And it's a child's book, but really it's an adult book, because, you know, I think, you know, to your point about agriculture, I think labelling things as good and bad at this point is you know, well, I mean, you can do it, but what is potentially more helpful, and what has a higher frequency? You know, everything, the light and the dark is part of the existence. One doesn't kind of operate without the other. And I think what's happening is, you know, there's just more light, and we're all supporting more light, and we're seeing, you know, and it's more relevant for us, you know. So organics are becoming more relevant, you know. Vaccinations are becoming a big topic, you know. People are starting to question and say, I want to take responsibility for my health and my children's health. You know, you've got people pulling down 5G towers because they don't think that 5G is healthy. And I don't believe 5G is healthy. I don't think it's caused corona, but I don't think it's healthy. So I think we're just now being able to see more light, and I think that the darkness will be slightly more irrelevant, and we'll.
I think, like you said, rather to say good or bad, because if I get into that conversation where I'm saying industrial agriculture is bad, then it makes it sound like I'm saying people that eat meat are bad, but that's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that I feel like, and it kind of makes more sense, that because you don't have to categorize anything to say that suffering won't be sustained. And then you can just look to where suffering is and be very honest about, is there suffering in this industry? And then, that not only are the animals suffering, but the people that work in those environments suffer as well. And, I listened to a podcast the other day about an American farmer who raises all of his chickens outside and cows free range, and what's involved for a person who's looking after the chickens, or someone that's working in a cage farm where they're exposed to the constant feces and in the air, and the fans and the dangerous machinery and all this kind of stuff, and the diseases because of the confined spaces, as opposed to somebody who's working with the chickens out in the open, just moving them around, and it's like, we can do that. And it actually would create more jobs. The price of food would be more expensive, but that is actually just reflecting the true cost in the product, instead of the cost being passed on into our health and being passed on into the environment later on. And so
true cost is a big thing. We pay too little for food. I mean, you look at milk. I mean, I've got a very large dairy client. They're a beautiful family owned business, and 4 generations, 108 years old they are now, and
very auspicious.
It's very auspicious. But you look at the large scale farming around dairy and the way they take the babies away, and there's a lot of suffering. I like how you put that. Is there suffering there? I think nature is making it very clear that things will or will not be supported. And I think you're right. Where there's suffering, it won't be supported. And I think this relates back to workplaces, our everyday work. And what can people do about this on an individual level? Well, you just, make a stand. I'm actually not going to put up with that, or I don't want to be treated like that, or you're not paying me enough, and I'm going to leave. And yes, there's some ouchiness and some risk, and in the same vein for me today, turning that work down and just saying, no, I won't be treated like that, and you won't treat my team like that. He's been incredibly rude to my team, and it's like, no, not having it. I'd rather lose the money and not do the work, because I think nature will support us if we are making those positive decisions. So it will be interesting to see how things unfold, but I am extremely optimistic that it's going to get better, but not without some turbulence in our seats.
And change is certain, and so when we say uncertain times, we know that change is coming, so we can be certain about that. And so if we're not in a panic and a reactive mode, and we're, like you said, connecting to ourselves first, then we can just be curious about where we're being moved, where the change is going. And so, and within that's a lot of actual creativity and hope and fun to come,
Yeah, and another one of my favourite quotes, which is not so spiritual, and I've never been able to find the source of it. It always just says anon underneath it. But if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And it really does resonate for me on a whole lot of fronts, because I think, in this day and age, we do have to stand for something. And if you don't want to stand for cruelty, I don't. So I'm not going to buy that industrially farmed meat, or the chicken or the fish, whatever. I don't want to stand for a boss, that's treating us all terribly. So I'm going to HR, or I'm going to quit, or whatever your decided course of action is. I think it is time for all of us to take a stand, and you can take small stands and they add up. And I think ultimately, if we all work towards, the life and the world that we want. And I think we all agree. I don't think you're going to go out into the street and find many people who like the old paradigm truly. Maybe, I actually heard this figure the other day. Did you know 26 people own 50% of the global wealth? 26 people. So I think apart from those 26 people, and maybe, some other high net worth individuals. For most of us are just saying this old paradigm of, work them as hard as you can, pay them as little as possible. It's redundant. We all want to spend more time with our families. We want to be able to keep our elderly at home with us and care for them. There's going to be some major adjustments coming so that we can all stand for something. We can all, create the world that we want. And I think it's really exciting. Personally, I think it's a very exciting time to be alive. Yeah. And if you can find that in a stillness, if you can get on the meds.
You have to. You don't.
Lie in the grass.
There's no choice. It's a must, Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll just start vibrating and then you'll just pop. Your head will blow up.
Yeah, and it is crazy, and we've never been through this before. And the whole economy is not designed to stop like this, but it stopped like this because as a collective, we're in a fear state, and we've reacted to a change or a shift because we didn't see it coming, because we weren't paying attention as a collective. And so we need the collective to start paying attention to itself and to pay attention to our inner state, realize that our dysfunction creates our reality, and resolve some of that shit so we can stop creating so much dysfunction. And so it's not so much of like, how are we going to fix the world? It's just a little bit of everyone doing their own piece of their own, sending messages around their own street, connecting directly where they can, and starting from themselves, but then working their way out. Because the first thing you realize when you start working on yourself is that you don't have any right to tell everybody else how to live their life, because you're so far away from getting your own shit sorted out. Yeah. And so you start from there, and like you said, take your garden and share that with the world, instead of coming from the place of, I'm broken, so I'm going to need the whole world to change to make me feel better, Yeah,
and I speak a lot about happiness versus satisfaction, with my team, and it's like, happiness seems a little lofty. It's kind of been overused. We've had Gretchen Rubin and the Happiness Project, and so many other books with titles, and the Happiness Institute and Gross National Happiness, and I kind of reframe that for me, and it's more about it's like satisfaction. It just seems a little more tangible. It's not. I'm not throwing happiness away completely, because it's kind of nice, but when are you satisfied? I know when I am truly satisfied is when I've had a nice meditation in the morning. I come downstairs and my little lady, Pearly, is just waking up, and she says, Mama, come into bed and give me a cuddle before we get up. That is when I'm most satisfied, or happy, whatever. But, I think it's those really small things, and I think, as I said to you, like so many people have been like, oh, what can we do in this time? How can we help others? Start a WhatsApp group, really small stuff. You don't have to take to the streets or, start hacking 5G towers down, or, you can do that also. And you might see me there. But it's really, really small things we can do. And those small gestures really contribute to that unified field and our cosmic collective consciousness,
Beautiful. That's probably the perfect place to end it, Skye Tipler. Would you like people to find you, or are you going to hide from them?
No, I can't hide anymore.
Okay. So how would they go?
I'm so happy for people to find me. I'm happy to share whatever I can share. If there was anything I said and somebody is interested in something, you can find me at mktcommunications.com.au is probably the best place. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't like Facebook. Private on Instagram. Probably better to find me at mktcommunications.
Beautiful.
.com.au. And things I'm so happy to share. Daniel, I don't know if you do show notes, but I can share the WhatsApp letter that we dropped.
I don't do show notes, no. But if you,
okay, we need show notes, don't we? Come on.
No, we don't do show notes. It's work.
Okay. Yeah. If anyone wants the WhatsApp letter, email me, skye@mktcommunications.com.au, and anything else.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.
Us, all of us, the listeners, I guess. That was so juicy and lovely to chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Goodbye.
Bye.